I knew something was off the moment Savannah gasped before even opening the box. That was her signature move, make it dramatic, make it about her. But this time, it wasn't just another necklace or designer bag. It was a house key. My birthday, my sister, her house. My mother's voice trembled with joy. We wanted to surprise her. Isn't it beautiful? I smiled out of habit, not happiness. Then they turned to me. My father handed me a thin envelope like he was sliding over a receipt. Inside, a plain card. No check, no gift, just a line scrawled in my mother's loopy handwriting. One day you'll understand. And I did, not in that moment, but soon, because that was the day I stopped waiting for their love to make sense. That was the day I started asking questions. By Christmas, I would have answers and the power to ruin everything they'd built on silence. Growing up, I used to believe that maybe if I worked hard enough, if I made myself useful enough, love would arrive like a late birthday card, slightly delayed, but still heartfelt. I stopped believing that the year I turned 11, that birthday, I had made my own cake, a box mix, chocolate. Savannah didn't like chocolate, but it was my favorite. I thought that day would be about me. My mom was supposed to help with the frosting. She said she would, but Savannah had a cheerleading tryout, and apparently that required 3 different hairstyles and a full emotional support team. I blew out the candles by myself. The wax dripped into the frosting. I scraped it off and ate it anyway. That was the first time I understood in our house. Being loved meant being visible, and Savannah sparkled. Over the years, that pattern never broke. Savannah failed a math test, and she got a tutor and a spa day to help her stress. I got straight A's and a quiet pat on the shoulder if they remembered. When I won my middle school writing contest, I came home holding the trophy like it meant something. My parents were out. Savannah had a dentist appointment. No one noticed the certificate taped to the fridge until I took it down 2 weeks later. I learned to stop expecting balloons. By the time high school hit, I'd built a routine around their absence. I worked 2 part-time jobs, took the bus home, cooked dinner more nights than not. Savannah had a car, of course, a red Jeep, a birthday gift for her freedom. They said, I never asked why my freedom didn't matter. I got into UC Berkeley with a full scholarship. Savannah got rejected from her top 5 schools and still ended up in a private liberal arts college where tuition ran higher than our mortgage. My parents helped cover it just until she finds her footing. When I got my first apartment, I saved up for every item, the dishes, the towels, even the cheap couch that made my back ache. Savannah moved into a downtown loft with granite countertops, paid for by someone else's credit and blind devotion. I wasn't bitter. Not then. Just practiced. I knew my role. I knew how to fade into the wallpaper of our family dynamic. Be useful. Be quiet. Don't ruin the narrative. So on my birthday, when I saw the gold box handed to Savannah and heard the words, we bought her a house, I didn't flinch. My face didn't crack. My voice didn't shake. I smiled like I was watching a stranger's milestone, clapped politely, sipped my coffee, and when my father handed me the envelope, thin and weightless, I took it without blinking. I even thanked him. That was my real gift restraint. But the moment that card slid open and I saw those 7 words one day, you'll understand something small inside me tilted. Not broke, not shattered, just shifted, like a door slightly ajar that had always been shut before. It wasn't the lack of a gift that stung, it was the certainty in their handwriting, the confidence that their dismissal would be absorbed like every slap before it, that I would swallow it and say thank you, that I wouldn't ask questions. They were almost right. That evening, I sat in my car longer than I should have. The key was still in the ignition, the card on the passenger seat. The house key they gave Savannah had glitter on the bow. Mine didn't even have an envelope flap that sealed properly. I stared at the handwriting. I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They were telling me I was the kind of daughter who would understand being left out, that I had earned their silence, that my usefulness made me undeserving of ceremony, and that's when it began, not anger, not revenge, just the quiet certainty that something didn't add up, that the math was wrong, that for all their talk of fairness and family and doing our best, There were numbers in the background that needed balancing. I remembered a comment I once overheard. I was 15, sitting in the hallway, knees to my chest after a long shift at the diner. I hadn't meant to listen, but the door was cracked open. My father's voice floated out like static. She's fine. Harper doesn't need much. She's self-sufficient. We can focus on Savannah. As if love were a limited resource. As if I'd been disqualified from needing it because I'd figured out how to survive without it. But I hadn't survived. I'd adapted. That night after my birthday, I couldn't sleep. I got up, opened my laptop, and started pulling up records. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe proof that my suspicions were just pettiness wearing a new dress. But the deeper I clicked, the stranger things got. A property tax record, a name I didn't recognize. A filing address that matched something my dad once mentioned in passing, a property modest, suburban, nondescript but listed under my name. My name. It made no sense. The next morning, I called Natalie Brooks, an old friend from college, law school, technically. We weren't best friends, but she'd helped me once before during a contract dispute at work. She was sharp, ethical, quiet. I think something weird is going on with my family. I told her. What kind of weird, she asked. I think they bought a house using my name. There was a long pause on the line. Okay, she said. Start from the beginning. Natalie didn't waste time. Send me what you have. She said. I forwarded screenshots, tax records, addresses, public filings, all with my name attached in neat, legal lines. She called back 20 minutes later, already typing as she talked. Okay, first off, that property exists. Second, yes, it's under your name, C, tied to a trust that lists you as the primary beneficiary. I've never seen this before, I whispered. Harper, are you sure you didn't co-sign something years ago? Some family form, school document? No, I said it firmly, and I meant it. I may have been passive for most of my life, but I never signed anything without reading it. And I certainly didn't forget owning a house. Natalie dug deeper. Over the next 2 days, she called in favors, accessed databases I didn't know existed, and sent me cryptic updates like, found the origin of the trust. Created 6 years ago, all documentation looks clean, maybe too clean. Who the hell is R? Callahan, that last one made my stomach drop. R. Callahan was Robert Callahan Quinn, my father. He rarely used the full name, only on documents. I remembered it from my college FAFSA forms, and now it was on trust paperwork. As the custodian. Natalie and I met in person the next Saturday. She laid out a folder thick with printouts across my kitchen table. This, she said, pointing to a deed transfer form, was filed 4 years ago. The property was moved under your name through a trust structure likely to avoid taxation or asset exposure. Meaning, someone used your name and social security number to shelter an asset. Is that even legal? Not without your informed consent. My hands went cold. And this, she continued, flipping to another page. This is a signature authorization for a minor renovation loan. See that curl on the R. Compare it to your own. She handed me a form I'd signed years ago, an apartment lease. The difference was obvious. Mine curled, theirs didn't. Someone had forged my signature. The worst part wasn't the forgery. It was the realization that they didn't even think I'd notice. I sat back in my chair, staring at a piece of paper that claimed I was a property owner, a borrower, a financial placeholder in someone else's game, and no one had ever bothered to tell me. Natalie watched my face carefully. You're not the first client I've had whose parents pulled something like this, she said gently, but usually it's to help the kid, not hide things from them. We were both quiet for a moment. Then I asked the question I'd been circling since my birthday. Why would they do this? Natalie didn't sugarcoat it. To protect assets, to cover debt, to move funds quietly without public exposure. You're the daughter who doesn't ask questions. That makes you convenient. That word convenient landed harder than it should have, because it was true. I'd always made it easy for them, never demanded attention, never made a scene. I'd worn invisibility like a badge of strength. They saw me as the strong one, and in their twisted logic, that meant I didn't need anything. I called my mother the next morning. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice was overly cheerful, as if she were balancing pancakes and guilt. Can I ask you something? I said, skipping pleasantries. Of course. Did you or Dad ever purchase property under my name, Silence? Harper, where's this coming from? It's a yes or no question. Her voice softened into that syrupy tone she always used when avoiding accountability. You've always been so independent, we thought it would help tax-wise. And you weren't using your credit, so you did. She sighed. We didn't want to burden you. It was just paperwork, nothing you had to worry about. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. I own a house, Mom, that I never lived in, that you never told me about. And isn't that a good thing? That's when I hung up. Natalie advised me to pull my full credit history. We sat together with laptops, scanning for every abnormality. There were three: the property, a trust account tied to a family LLC, a series of micro transfers between internal bank accounts over the last 5 years. Each amount was small enough to avoid detection. Together, they formed a pattern. These transfers funded something, Natalie said, eyes narrowing. But what I already knew, Savannah's skincare brand, a failed venture my parents had celebrated with launch parties and Instagram posts and quietly buried when it tanked. The family LLC had absorbed the debt. My name had been used as part of the shield, and yet they gave Savannah a house on my birthday. No explanation, no apology, just a card that said, "One day you'll understand." But now I did. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was the financial scapegoat, the legal vessel, the name on the ledger they assumed would never speak up. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. They didn't know I'd been studying law. Do you want to pursue fraud? Natalie asked me that night. I shook my head. I want to own what they tried to hide. I want them to see my name and not be able to use it. She nodded. Then we do this the clean way. By Monday, the plan was in motion. We'd file ownership confirmations, set up a shell LLC, use Natalie as a proxy to reclaim the deed. No confrontations, no warning. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for clarity. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being seen. Part 3, their Golden Girl, 1,000 words, Ngoe Kethu Nat, Harper Bat Dao Ninla, Kach Savannah, Luan Duok U Ava Duok Dathu. If I wanted to understand why they did it, I had to start with Savannah. My sister had always been the Golden Girl, not just pretty glowingly so, blonde hair that curled just the right way, a dimple that appeared when she laughed, and a talent for making every mistake seem charming. When she totaled Dad's car at 16, it was framed as a learning experience. When she failed out of freshman year, it was a much-needed break to reset and reflect. When her skincare line went bankrupt, they called it market turbulence and invited the extended family to a relaunch brunch with mimosas and fresh peonies on every table. They didn't just forgive her mistakes, they reinvented them as triumphs. I used to envy her ease. At family dinners, Savannah could show up an hour late, announce she was rethinking her brand voice, and my parents would beam like she'd cured cancer. Meanwhile, I'd get side eyes for arriving 5 minutes late from working overtime. You push yourself too hard, Mom would say, her voice laced with something that sounded like disapproval pretending to be concern. But I didn't push myself for praise. I pushed myself to survive. And still, I was the one they overlooked until they needed my name on a form. After the investigation started, I couldn't help but look back at all the times Savannah was the star and I was the stagehand. Like the summer after high school, when she got a job at a fashion boutique but quit after 3 days because retail energy is toxic. Dad gave her a week in Palm Springs to clear her head. That same summer, I worked double shifts at the grocery store and helped repaint our neighbor's deck for cash. My only break was a dentist appointment. No one bought me sunscreen or congratulated my work ethic. The imbalance didn't always scream. Sometimes it whispered. Like the family Christmas card the year I graduated from Berkeley. My name wasn't on it, just Savannah posing with a dog she didn't own and a caption that read, "Our little star." Making moves in the wellness world, or the time I got promoted and texted the group chat, no response. But when Savannah posted a blurry selfie at a co-working space, Mom replied with, "You're glowing, baby 3 exclamation points." I counted. I think the most painful part wasn't what they gave Savannah. It was how natural they made it all feel, like I was supposed to applaud her for being lifted while I stayed grounded. And I did. For years, I clapped for her dreams, even when they were funded by mine. Natalie kept digging. One morning, she called me with a clipped tone I hadn't heard before. Harper, I found something. What is it? A business loan. Taken out 5 years ago under the family LLC. You're listed as a silent guarantor. I don't even know what that means. It means if it defaulted, and it did, you're technically liable for some of the fallout. Not legally binding since your signature was forged, but they used me. Yes, that night, I opened an old box of family photos. It had been years since I looked through them. I found one from my 8th birthday. Savannah had frosting on her nose. I was holding a wrapped book. I remember thinking it was too heavy to be a toy. It wasn't a toy. It was a math workbook. Even my gifts had messages. Be smart. Be useful. Don't expect joy. I decided I'd go to the next family event not to confront anyone, not yet, but to observe, to watch how they operated when they thought I was still asleep to the truth. As it happened, that event came sooner than expected. Savannah invited us all to a soft opening of her new podcast studio, which of course was inside the very house they gave her on my birthday. I just feel so lucky, she said in the group chat. Blessed to have such supportive parents. I RSVP'd, yes. When I arrived, Savannah greeted me in a silk jumpsuit and bare feet. Her house smelled like lavender and something expensive burning in a diffuser. She hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that was meant to smell like absolution. I'm so glad you came, she whispered. I know Mom and Dad can be complicated. I pulled back slightly. I thought you were happy with how things are. She blinked. Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't ask for a house. It just kind of happened. It just kind of happened. Like birthdays, like signatures, like me being erased without anyone noticing. The house had white walls, soft lighting, and a kitchen that probably cost more than my entire apartment. I wandered to the back room and found a framed plaque, the Savannah Project, sponsored by Quinn Family Ventures. Quinn Family Ventures, the same name on the LLC that buried me in silent debt. My stomach twisted. I stepped back out to the patio, where Dad was nursing a scotch and watching Savannah talk to a guest. He looked relaxed, proud, like nothing was wrong, like I was still asleep. I sat beside him. He didn't even glance at me. Beautiful place, I said casually. She deserves it, he said without thinking. Why? That made him pause. He turned to me because she's been through a lot. I held his gaze, and I haven't silence. He took another sip. I stood up and left without saying goodbye. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and sat in the dark for a long time. Not sad, not angry, just still. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to stop, but they were going to be exposed. And not with shouting, with documents, with ownership, with truth. The call came on a Thursday. I was in the middle of formatting a policy brief when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. We weren't estranged, at least. Not in the way people normally mean. We texted occasionally, mostly logistical things. Are you coming for Thanksgiving? What size sweater does Jared wear? Jared was Savannah's ex-boyfriend. She always dated men like he was still around. I picked up Harper. My mother's voice was sugary soft, a tone she reserved for favor asking. Hey, your dad's been having some back pain. He's trying to move the holiday boxes himself. He won't let me help. Would you mind driving up this weekend straight to the ask? No small talk. No, how are you? Just straight into the version of me they like best useful, quiet, reliable. I have work. I understand, she said, voice tighter now. It's just he can't really lift things anymore. And you know how he gets if things aren't exactly where they should be. Guilt was her dialect. I paused. My mind ran through everything, the forged documents, the fake signatures, the business debt pinned to me, the fact that they gave Savannah a house on my birthday. And still, part of me hesitated, because that's what manipulation wrapped in tradition does. It makes obedience feel like virtue. I'll be there Saturday morning. She exhaled, relieved. You're a good girl, Harper. Always have been. That sentence hit like a slap wrapped in silk. I drove 4 hours the next morning, through fog and old music and too much coffee. My childhood home looked exactly the same: white porch railing, cracked flower pots, mailbox leaning just slightly to the left. The only thing that had changed was me. I parked, sat for a moment, then walked up the steps, rang the bell. Mom opened the door like she'd been standing behind it for hours. "Sweetheart," she sang, "come in, come in. It's so good to have you home." Home. The word felt foreign. I stepped inside. The air smelled like lemon polish, roasting chicken, and a faint hint of something burnt they never acknowledged. "Savannah's not here," she said, almost too quickly. I shrugged. Didn't expect her. She's busy. Of course she was. By noon, I'd helped Dad lift 8 storage bins labeled Xmas front, Xmas mantle, and Xmas spare. He didn't say much, just grunted, directed with his finger, and wiped sweat with a monogrammed handkerchief that had always felt more performative than practical. "Thanks for coming," he muttered once without looking up. "No problem." We didn't talk about the trust, or the forged documents, or the house. That wasn't how our family worked. We built everything on top of silence and called it structure. That night, we had dinner. Mom made her signature pot roast, the one she claimed took 3 hours, but usually came from a slow cooker and a seasoning packet. She poured herself wine, poured me water. "So," she said brightly, "any thoughts on that admin job your father sent you?" I blinked. "What?" "The one in the envelope, remember, from your birthday." I held her gaze. "You sent me a job listing as a gift. Well, we thought it was helpful," she said, now defensive. "Better than clutter. Better than clutter." That's what I was to them: tidy up my ambition, make it manageable, containable, small. I smiled and cut my meat. After dinner, I couldn't sleep. The guest room still had my old soccer trophies, the faded posters, the scratch on the wall from when I fell out of bed during a thunderstorm at 9. But the air felt too tight, the walls too quiet. I walked barefoot down the hall, a ritual I'd performed hundreds of times. As a child, late-night water trips, hiding from shouting, hoping to be invisible. The door to my father's office was open. That was strange. He never left it open. He treated that room like a sanctum locked drawers. Fingerprint smudges cleaned with microfiber, documents stacked at perfect 90-degree angles. And yet now the door stood ajar. The lamp inside glowed. I stepped in. Nothing looked immediately suspicious. Same old books, same pen holder, same model ship collecting dust. But then I noticed a file folder sitting half pulled from the cabinet drawer. Curiosity isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, a shift in breath, a lean forward. I opened the drawer the rest of the way. Inside, bank statements, printouts, folders labeled QFV Holdings, transfer schedule, reinvestment plan. Some had my name on them, some didn't, but they all told the same story: money moved, filtered, disguised, and in the middle of it all, my identity. Then tucked near the back, a plain white envelope sealed in wax. It read, "To be opened upon Harper Quinn's legal challenge." I froze. Legal challenge. They were preparing for the possibility that I'd figure it out. They knew what they'd done. They just gambled I wouldn't have the courage or the audacity to push back. I sat in my childhood desk chair, hands shaking, pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I needed to absorb what this meant. They had documents ready. They were afraid. Not of me exactly, but of the version of me that might wake up, the version who would stop being convenient. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket, turned off the light, and walked out. The house was silent, except for the tick of the kitchen clock. Mom was asleep. Dad snored in rhythm. Everything looked so peaceful on the surface, as if the foundation wasn't made of forged paper and unspoken betrayal. I climbed the stairs slowly, the envelope pressing against my hip with each step like a ghost tapping my side. That night, I didn't sleep, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't restless. I was ready. Part 5, the envelope. They feared 1,000 words. Ngoy ketun hat. Harper mofong bi. Kamfa nuhungi gia din kogyao kiva bat dao lap Lai Quyen so hu hop fap. I waited until I was back in my apartment to open it, not because I was scared, though I was, but because I needed the silence of my own space, my own air. Somewhere not perfumed with lemon polish and denial, I laid the envelope on the kitchen table like it was a live wire. The wax seal cracked with a soft snap. Inside were 6 items, a notarized memo typed by a lawyer I didn't recognize, outlining preemptive protections in the event of familial contest. A copy of the trust deed, yes, the one with my name on it. A signed affidavit from my father, asserting that I had given verbal consent to the arrangement. A printout of a dated email from his address to mine, marked red, in which I supposedly acknowledged the trust. A forged response from me, brief, bland, and obviously not in my tone. A post-it, handwritten, my mother's handwriting. If she sees this, it means we failed. Try to keep her calm. Keep me calm. The arrogance of it stunned me. They hadn't just hidden things. They had prepared for discovery, created a false narrative in advance, built a legal paper trail designed to silence the truth if it ever dared to surface. But there was a fatal flaw. I had never replied to that email because I had never received it. I called Natalie, start talking. She said the moment she picked up, I opened the envelope. It's worse than we thought. I read everything to her, each detail, each line of manufactured consent. She didn't interrupt, just listened and typed. When I finished, there was silence. Then that email. Do you still use the same provider? Yes, good. Pull a full access log. We'll trace IP addresses. If they spoofed a response, we can prove it never originated from your device. Even if it's been years, Harper, nothing online ever truly vanishes. We spent the next 3 days assembling what Natalie called a quiet case. We're not going nuclear, she explained. We're just building leverage. Paper is power. I collected every bank record I had, my credit history, my employment timeline, my email activity. Natalie found a digital forensics expert who confirmed the so-called email trail had been doctored. She showed me how the original email was sent from my father's device, and the reply came from an IP address located in their town on the same day I'd been hiking in Arizona with no cell service. They'd forged my acknowledgement on a day I was off the grid. It was bold and stupid. In the meantime, Natalie filed paperwork to formally assert my ownership of the property, not under my name directly, too risky, too emotional. Instead, she used an LLC she'd helped me create, Ashridge Holdings. We'll move it cleanly, she said, like they never existed in the equation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted autonomy. I wanted a record that couldn't be rewritten by family sentiment or staged birthday brunches. That week, I walked by the house they gave Savannah, just once, just to see. It was larger than I remembered, or maybe I was just smaller in their stories. The porch had been painted navy blue, new flower beds, fairy lights in the windows. She was building her life on soil they had stolen from me. I didn't knock, didn't make a scene, just walked past quietly, because the storm wasn't coming from my mouth. It was coming on paper. 3 days later, Natalie called. It's done. The property title has been re-recorded under Ashridge. You're the sole legal owner. I didn't know what to say. Harper, she added. They'll find out eventually. The mail will come, the tax statements, the ownership notice. Do you want to send them something first? A letter of intent, I thought about it. No, I said, not yet, but I did send one thing. A small white box. No bow, no tag, no card. Inside a copy of the ownership deed, a photocopy of the digital forensic report, and one sentence, typed cleanly, in the center of a cream page. You underestimated the quiet one. I mailed it to the family home, no return address. Then I waited. The next week was still eerily so. No calls, no texts, not even a forwarded meme from Savannah. I imagined the box sitting on the kitchen counter, my father reading it twice, then silently placing it in a drawer, my mother standing behind him, trying to hold her voice steady. Savannah confused, maybe oblivious, thinking it was some legal mistake. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they had built and finally hear it echo. And as for me, I went to a notary that Friday and signed final confirmation paperwork for the LLC transfer. Then I walked out of the building and stood in the late morning sun, blinking like someone seeing daylight for the first time in years. The deed was mine. The name on the records was mine, and for once the truth belonged to me, not buried in a Christmas box or wrapped in fake affection. It was sharp, unapologetic, real. They didn't call, not the next day, not the next week, nothing. No text from Mom with a no voicemail from Dad, trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. No emoji-filled deflection from Savannah. Just stillness. I didn't know what I expected. I had walked into this with clarity, with purpose, but I had forgotten the way my family fought. They didn't throw plates or shout down hallways. They punished you with absence. They vanished as if their love had a kill switch. I checked the mail every day, half expecting a letter, a legal notice, even a scribbled note on a torn envelope. But there was nothing. No retaliation, no denial, no apology. They didn't even try to explain. It was almost impressive how quickly they could erase someone they didn't understand. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in a house after a power outage, where every familiar hum is gone and you're left with your own breath and too much space. Natalie called to check in. They're not responding. I told her, did you want them to? I don't know. She paused. Sometimes silence is just another form of control. Let them sit in it. You don't owe them anything. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, she was right. But knowing that and feeling it were two different things. I kept replaying memories I hadn't meant to store, small moments, ones that at the time felt unremarkable. Like the way Mom always double-checked Savannah's birthday wish list but never asked what I wanted, or how Dad would offer to help her move apartments, but assumed I could handle everything myself even at 19. With no car and no money for a moving van. Or that time in high school when I made dinner for the whole family lasagna, salad, homemade garlic bread, and Savannah burned a pan of boxed brownies. They praised her for trying. They didn't say a word to me. It was always like that. Their love wasn't conditional, it was curated. Savannah fit the picture. I didn't. And now that I had colored outside their lines, they had taken the frame away altogether. Still, I kept functioning, went to work, ate my meals, slept restlessly, but I slept. But my dreams shifted. I dreamed of the house, the real one, the one in my name. I saw it filled with noise, not conflict, not performance, just presence, laughter that wasn't rehearsed, footsteps that weren't tiptoes. In those dreams, I belonged there. In waking life, I hadn't stepped foot in it yet. 2 weeks after mailing the box, I got a text, not from Mom, not from Dad, from Savannah. Hey, can we talk no punctuation, no emojis, no gifts? That alone told me she was serious. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit for 2 days. On the third day, she texted again. I don't know what's going on, but I found the papers. Mom looked like she saw a ghost. Is it true that house? The documents, that house? Not my house. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered. Then I typed, yes. She replied almost instantly. But why? Why? As if she hadn't spent years reaping benefits she didn't earn. As if I hadn't watched her receive and receive and receive while I was taught to be grateful for scraps. I didn't answer. I left her on read. Because here's the thing about silence, it cuts both ways. They had taught me to be quiet. Now I was. But this time it was intentional. This time it was power. A few days later, Mom sent an email. The subject line, let's not ruin the holidays. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement, just a 3-line paragraph about keeping things civil and remembering what matters most. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because they were still pretending nothing had happened. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted reset, control, repackaged as peace. That weekend, I finally drove out to the house, my house. The driveway was cracked, the shutters needed repainting, and the grass had grown up around the fence posts. It looked abandoned, but not in a tragic way. More like it was waiting. I stood on the porch with the keys in my hand, not trembling, just still. Then I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was musty, but sunlight poured through the windows like something forgiving. Hardwood floors, faded wallpaper, a fireplace that hadn't worked in years. No furniture, no memory. Just possibility. And in the quiet, I realized something. They hadn't stolen my life. They'd just miswritten my role. And now, finally, I was the one holding the pen. I spent my first full day in the house with a notepad and silence. Not to decorate, not to nest, to map. I moved from room to room, cataloging what needed repair, but also what needed to be reclaimed. This place had been used like I had a structure taken for granted, buried under assumptions, expected to stay standing without acknowledgement. But it was mine now, and I would understand every inch of it. Natalie met me the next morning, legal pad in hand, blazer sharp, tone sharper. I think it's time we look at the deeper ledger. She said, the surface assets are already under your name, but the paper trail behind the LLC runs wider than we thought. She unrolled a timeline on the kitchen island. Each pen on the paper marked a year, each year a transfer, each transfer a story. My name was all over it. The documents were spread out in waves tax filings, capital reallocations, trust dividends. They used me in at least 6 internal family transfers, sometimes for tax advantages, sometimes to avoid personal credit checks, sometimes just to shield risk. They didn't just use you to buy this house, Natalie said. They used you to preserve their image. What does that mean legally? She hesitated. Gray area? Because technically, you benefited from none of it, but your name was used in financial representations applications, tax strategies, and at least 2 investment declarations. Were any of those forged? She nodded. 2 signatures, one from 2018, one from 2021, both filed through the family holding company. I laughed dry, hollow. They were running a side business under my name. I remembered the dinner party in 2021. Savannah had just launched her skincare line. There were twinkle lights, champagne, catered appetizers. My father stood up and gave a toast about family back and family, how some people are born for spotlight, some to build the stage. Everyone clapped. I did too. Turns out I had funded the platform. I just didn't know I'd been billed. Do I have grounds for criminal fraud? I asked Natalie. Yes, but do you want that trial's public mess? It won't bring anything back except noise. She was right. What I wanted wasn't retribution. It was permanence. I didn't need them to pay. I needed it to stop. So we began the slow process of dismantling the paper identity they had built around me. First, Natalie filed a declaration with the Secretary of State, officially removing my name from any officer position in Quinn Family Ventures. Then she submitted affidavits challenging the use of my name in past tax structures, alongside notarized documentation proving I had never authorized the involvement. We retained a CPA to audit every year since 2017. There were anomalies in all of them. At night, I read them like bedtime stories, statements with line items labeled QFV support, H, Quinn discretionary, asset buffering. I had no clue what half of it meant, but I was learning. I highlighted, annotated, cross-checked, and with every mark of ink, I felt more real. Savannah texted again. Harper, are you okay? I didn't respond. She followed with a voice note, 38 seconds of stumbling emotion. I didn't know about the paperwork, I swear. I thought they had it all handled. I didn't mean to take anything that was yours. She paused, then added, but I didn't think you'd do something like this either, like this, as if truth was betrayal. I deleted the message, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to keep re-listening to someone learning how consequences work. The CPA uncovered the final thread a week later. A private loan had been issued 3 years ago, with me listed as guarantor. It was a line of credit used to pay off the mortgage on the lake house, the house Mom and Dad always called their legacy. They had secured it with my credit without my knowledge. And now, that debt was paid by refinancing via a trust account that had quietly drained a small investment portfolio opened in my name as a baby. The account had been worth $82,000. Now it was empty. They didn't just use your name, Natalie said. They used your past. She suggested filing a cease and desist letter to block further use of my identity in financial instruments. We drafted it that afternoon. It was short, unemotional, legal. Just a quiet boundary written in legalese. I signed it with steady fingers. Harper Quinn, fully formed, finally awake. By the end of the month, everything was in motion. Ashridge Holdings stood on clean paperwork. My name was detached from the family business. The CPA's report was sealed. The final package was sent registered mail to their attorney. I didn't need to see their reaction, because this wasn't a performance. It was a declaration. I would no longer be silent. I would no longer be convenient. I would no longer be invisible. In the final folder, tucked beneath the ledger sheets and legal documents, Natalie had placed a handwritten note. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in, signs a form, and locks the door behind it. I kept that one, pinned it to the fridge. Next to it, I taped a copy of the deed, not because I needed the reminder, but because, for the first time, I didn't want to forget who I was. Christmas came with snow that year, soft and deceitful, the kind of snow that looked like a postcard, but felt like a warning. I watched it fall through the car windshield as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Same wreath on the door, same lights blinking like nothing had changed. It was surreal, because I had spent the morning rehearsing my silence, not my speech. I wasn't here to explain. I wasn't here to demand recognition or tears or an apology that would never come. I was here to deliver truth. And truth, when carried properly, didn't need volume. It just needed to be undeniable. Inside, the house smelled like pine-scented candles and cinnamon rolls. Mom fluttered between the kitchen and the living room, wearing her usual holiday uniform, red velvet and self-importance. Dad stood by the fireplace, mug in hand, surveying his kingdom like a man still convinced he ruled it. Savannah was already there, wrapped in cream-colored cashmere, posing near the tree for a selfie with her mug labeled Blessed. I walked in quietly, placed a single white box under the tree, and took a seat. No one noticed at first, Harper Mom exclaimed finally, as if my presence had just registered. You made it. I smiled. Of course. Dad nodded. Did you bring wine? No. I said, just a gift. The box sat beneath the tree, unlabeled, unglittered, perfectly square. Savannah raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. You'll see. We went through the motions, eggnog, anecdotes. Savannah opening a designer purse and squealing as if it were the first time she'd ever seen leather. Mom cried. Dad chuckled. A toast was raised. To new beginnings, he said. I lifted my glass, but I didn't drink. Then Mom looked at me expectantly. Your turn. I rose from the couch, walked to the tree, and picked up the box. My fingers didn't shake. I turned to Dad. This is for you, I said, and handed it over. He opened it slowly, more confused than cautious. Inside, a copy of the deed to the lake house. Under Ashridge Holdings, a notarized statement verifying the title transfer, a forensic report on the forged email, a cease and desist order, a cover letter with a single sentence. This time, I'm the one deciding what's mine. For a moment, no one moved. Dad scanned the top page. Then the next, his brow furrowed. He flipped again, and again. Mom peered over his shoulder. Her smile faltered as the words settled. Harper, what is this exactly what it looks like? You can't be serious. I'm not just serious. I'm thorough. Savannah blinked. Wait, is this about the house, the one bought with my name, paid for with my credit, protected with my silence? Mom shook her head. We were going to tell you when I asked. When the bank repossessed it, when the LLC collapsed, you don't understand. Actually, I said, voice even, I do. For the first time in my life, I understand everything. Silence stretched thick in the room, the kind that doesn't settle, it suffocates. Dad placed the papers down like they might burn his hands. Why now, he said, not looking at me. Why ruin Christmas? You ruin birthdays, I replied. One seemed like a fair trade. Savannah stood, clutching her purse like a life raft. You could have just asked. We would have worked it out. No, I said gently. You would have denied it. You would have gaslit me. You would have smiled and handed me another envelope with a job listing taped to the inside. Mom flinched. That was practical. That was insulting. Dad cleared his throat. This doesn't change anything. We're still a family. No, I said, stepping back. You're a unit, a story, a narrative. I was just written in as the margin. I looked at Mom. You taught me to stay small so Savannah could shine. You taught me to be grateful for scraps. You taught me silence was strength. Then I looked at Savannah, and you took and took because no one told you not to, because it never cost you anything. Her lip trembled. I didn't feel sorry. I turned to the door. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to say one thing. They waited. I'm not giving it back. Not the house, not my name, not anymore. And with that, I left. The cold hit me like a baptism sharp, honest and clean. I walked to my car without looking back. No one followed me, and not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to operate without the power of silence. And I had just taken that from them. I drove through quiet streets, snow swirling in every beam of light. By the time I reached the lake house, dusk had settled. I unlocked the door with my own key, walked in, and shut the world out behind me. Inside, everything was still. The heat clicked on slowly. The walls didn't creak for attention. They simply accepted me. I made tea, pulled out the files one last time, not to reread them, but to let them go. I stacked them in a drawer and closed it. Final. I lit the fireplace not out of nostalgia, but as a gesture, to myself, to the girl who used to scrape burnt frosting off her own birthday cake, to the woman who no longer needs to prove she matters. Outside, snow blanketed the trees. Inside, I wrapped myself in a blanket and curled up near the fire. There was no music, no sound, but the crackle of flame and the soft thrum of peace. And I realized something. They had always underestimated the quiet one. But the quiet one had built a new ending, and this time, no one else got to write it. They didn't call on New Year's, not even a forwarded meme from Savannah, no email from Dad with his annual top 10 ways to start the year. Right. No text from Mom saying 2024 is for healing, just silence. A different kind of silence now, not the condescending one they used to control me. This one was brittle, shaken, like they were unsure of their script, like the roles had shifted, and they didn't know who was allowed to speak anymore. I didn't celebrate the new year. I cleaned the lake house, scrubbed old residue from the kitchen tiles, peeled faded labels from dusty jars, vacuumed the cobwebbed corners of rooms no one had entered in years. It wasn't about hygiene. It was about reclaiming space. Every sweep of the broom felt like erasing the footprints of secrets. Every drawer emptied felt like releasing old debts I never agreed to. On January 4th, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the penmanship instantly. My mother's, "Dear Harper, I don't know where to start. Maybe I should say I'm sorry, and maybe I should explain. But the truth is, I don't know what to say when the story I believed in has cracked open. I thought we were doing our best. I truly did. We were scared, scared of what might happen to Savannah if we didn't support her, scared of your strength, too. If I'm honest, you never needed us the way she did. We made choices, some right, some wrong, but you've made your choice now, too, and I respect that. Love, Mom." No apology, just acknowledgement. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I placed the letter in a drawer not out of reverence, but containment. Not everything that cracks needs to be rebuilt. Savannah followed days later with a voice message. "I talked to Mom. I don't know what to say either. You were always so strong." I think I leaned on that. I didn't mean to take anything from you, but I never asked what it cost. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, not to fix anything, just to listen. That, surprisingly, hurt more than I expected, because for the first time, she sounded real, still unaware, still centering herself, but trying. And that's the thing about siblings, they're shaped by the same storm, but learn different forms of denial. I didn't respond. Not yet. I started spending more nights at the lake house. It wasn't home yet, but it was quiet. A quiet I chose. I filled the space with slow rituals, morning tea on the porch, evening walks along the frozen shoreline, no deadlines, no family expectations, no pretending. For once, the silence didn't demand anything from me. It just let me be. I thought I might feel lonely, but loneliness only lives where expectation lingers. And I had let go of mine. I no longer needed them to call. I no longer needed them to see me. I just needed them to stop using me, and they finally had. One afternoon, I got an email from Natalie. Your financial profile is officially clean, every record disputed, every misuse documented and sealed. You're free. 2 words, you're free. It felt less like a reward, more like a clearance, like oxygen in a room that had been sealed shut for years. I looked at the copy of the deed hanging near the entryway, still crisp, still absurd, still mine. I think the hardest part wasn't what they did, it was what they believed. They truly thought I would always say yes, that I would carry the load, stay quiet, absorb their imbalance like a sponge. They called it trust, but what they meant was convenience. They trusted I would never break the pattern, but I had, and now they were left with the silence they built. Sometimes I still wonder if Dad reads through the documents at night, trying to find a loophole. If Mom rehearses conversations in her head that she'll never say aloud, if Savannah lies awake, realizing that love doesn't erase consequences, I don't ask, I don't check, because this isn't about them anymore. This is about me, about the quiet woman who finally stopped letting people speak for her, about the daughter who learned that being strong doesn't mean being used, about the person who claimed a life hidden beneath years of "you'll understand someday." And now I do. Spring arrived late that year. Not with blooms or blue skies, but in subtle ways. A breeze that didn't cut. The first bird call I'd heard in weeks. A crack in the lake's icy surface. I stood by the window, tea in hand, watching the thaw creep across the edges of the water. No dramatic ending, no cinematic closure, just a slow release, and I realized this is how healing really happens. Not with noise, not with grand speeches, but with quiet repetition, the kind that says, I'm still here. I had no idea what would come next. I wasn't chasing reinvention or revenge. I wasn't posting Instagram updates to prove I'd won. I just lived, cleaned out closets, learned to make bread that didn't burn, read books I used to pretend I'd finished. I wrote again not for work or survival, but because words had always been mine. I filled journals, not court documents, stories that didn't require anyone's approval, especially not theirs. I thought a lot about names, the ones they gave me, the ones they erased me from, the ones I signed without knowing the cost. Now, I chose mine. Harper Quinn, not a placeholder, not a backup plan, a whole damn person. Occasionally, I still receive texts from Savannah, soft pings in the background of my day. Just thinking of you. Mom brought up the lake house again. If you ever want to talk, I never blocked her. But I didn't answer either. Not yet, because forgiveness isn't a shortcut to reunion. It's a boundary. And for now, mine held firm. One Sunday, I found an old photo in a box in the attic. Me at 7, holding a handmade birthday card. No party, no gifts, just me, smiling, hoping someone would walk in, see it, say something. They never did. I cried for her, not because she was weak, but because she waited so long for someone else to name her worth. I whispered to the photo, like a vow, "You're done waiting." Then I tucked it into a drawer, next to the deed and Natalie's note. Some stories need to be archived, not relived. The lake house became my space of choosing, not because it was perfect. It wasn't. The pipes clanged at night, the guest room windows stuck, the chimney puffed smoke in the wrong direction, but it was mine, and more importantly, no one gave it to me. They never meant for me to have it. They tried to hide it, manipulate it, spin it into a favor I should feel grateful for. But I'd taken it back, not out of spite, out of truth. One evening, I walked along the edge of the property and noticed the first crocus pushing through the cold soil. Delicate, defiant, unapologetically small, but rooted. Just like me, I thought about what I'd say if they ever showed up. If Mom knocked with trembling hands and practiced words. If Dad stood behind her, arms crossed, trying to make eye contact without saying it first. If Savannah asked, "Can we start over?" And maybe one day I'll answer. Maybe I'll invite them in not for closure, but out of curiosity to see who they are without the script. But for now, they stay out there, and I stay in here. Not hiding, just choosing peace. Because peace isn't passive, it's a declaration. Sometimes I leave the front door open, just a crack. Let the wind move through the house. Let it remind me that air doesn't ask for permission to enter. It just does. Like truth, like healing, like me. I still get birthday cards from my mother. She doesn't write one day, you'll understand anymore. Now it's just thinking of you, love, Mom. I place them unopened in a drawer, not to disrespect her effort, but to protect my progress. I don't need her words anymore. I've found my own. And when people ask what happened between me and my family, I tell them some houses aren't meant to be shared, because this story, it wasn't about them losing a daughter. It was about me reclaiming myself. And this ending, it isn't tidy, it isn't loud, but it's mine.